Mira didn't know that the stranger who had just saved her life was the most powerful wolf in existence. She didn't know that the warmth spreading through her chest wasn't gratitude. And she certainly didn't know that when their eyes met across the blood-soaked clearing, every plan she had ever made for her life had just burned to ash. The rogue's claws had been inches from her throat when he appeared. Not running, not shifting. Just there, between her and death, as if the space had been waiting for him all along. One hand around the rogue's neck, one brutal twist, then silence, except for the hammering of her heart and the rain beginning to fall through the canopy of ancient pines above them. He turned to face her, and Mira forgot how to breathe. He was tall, impossibly so, with shoulders that blocked out what remained of the fading light filtering through the storm clouds. Dark hair plastered to his forehead from the rain, sharp jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble, cheekbones that could cut glass. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of aged whiskey, rimmed with gold that seemed to catch fire even in the dimness, and they were looking at her like she was something precious he had been searching for across centuries. "Are you hurt?" His voice was low and rough, like thunder rolling across distant mountains. Mira pressed her back harder against the tree behind her, the rough bark scraping through her thin traveling cloak. Her supplies were scattered across the forest floor, her water skin split open and bleeding its contents into the mud. The rogue's body lay crumpled between them, already beginning to cool. She should run. Every instinct she had developed in 23 years of survival screamed at her to run, but her feet wouldn't move. "I'm fine," she managed, forcing steel into her voice despite the trembling that threatened to betray her. "Thank you for your help, but I can manage from here." His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Something almost like amusement flickered in those amber depths. "You were about to be killed." "I had a plan." "Did it involve dying?" Mira's chin lifted despite the trembling in her limbs. She was used to being underestimated. Small for a wolf, quieter than most, with unremarkable brown hair and gray eyes that people forgot almost as soon as they looked away. She had learned young that being forgettable kept her alive. "I had a knife." "The one that fell 10 feet behind you when he lunged?" Her cheeks heated with embarrassment, and something else she refused to name. "I would have managed." He took a step closer, and something inside Mira's chest pulled tight, like a golden string she hadn't known existed, tugging her forward against her will. She pressed back harder against the bark, ignoring the rough scrape against her spine, the cold rain soaking through her clothes. "What's your name?" he asked. His voice had dropped lower, softer, like he was approaching a wounded animal. "What's yours?" That almost smile again. It transformed his face, softened the sharp edges into something almost approachable. "Theron." Just Theron. No pack name, no title. Wolves always introduced themselves with their pack, unless they were rogues or running from something. She studied him more carefully, cataloging details. His clothes were well made, dark fabric that moved easily with his body, clearly expensive but practical. No visible weapons, but he didn't need them. She had watched him kill a rogue with his bare hands without breaking a sweat, without even shifting, which should have been impossible. Dangerous. Everything about him screamed dangerous. And yet that pull in her chest was getting stronger, almost painful in its intensity. "Mira," she said finally, because the silence was stretching too long and he wasn't looking away. His gaze felt like sunlight on her skin, warming her despite the cold rain. "My name is Mira." "Mira." He said it like he was tasting the word, rolling it across his tongue, committing it to memory. The way he spoke her name made her stomach flip. "You're traveling alone." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway, her defenses rising automatically. "I'm on my way to the Northern Territories. There's a village that takes in wolves without packs. I've heard they don't ask questions. Something flickered in his golden eyes. Concern, maybe, or something deeper. You're packless? By choice. The old defensiveness rose in her throat, familiar as breathing. I left. I don't need a pack. Everyone needs a pack. I don't need anyone. The words came out sharper than she intended, and she forced herself to soften her tone. I appreciate your help, truly, but I should keep moving before night falls completely. She pushed away from the tree and bent to gather her scattered belongings. A bedroll, soaked through but salvageable. A water skin, ruined. The knife he had mocked, which she shoved back into her belt with more force than necessary. Her hands were shaking. She clenched them into fists and willed them to stop. The northern pass is 3 days from here, Theron said. He hadn't moved, just stood there watching her with those unnerving eyes. There are more rogues between here and there. A lot more. The reports say at least 24 have been spotted in the valleys. I'll manage. You keep saying that, because it's true. She straightened, slinging her pack over her shoulder. The weight of it grounded her, reminded her of who she was. A survivor. Someone who didn't need saving. I've been on my own for 2 years. I've survived worse than a few rogues. His jaw tightened. She watched the muscle flex beneath his skin and felt that pull again. Stronger now, almost overwhelming. Her wolf was pacing inside her chest, whining, pressing against her ribs like it wanted to burst free and run to him. That had never happened before. Her wolf was always quiet, always controlled, always obedient. Come with me, Theron said. Mira blinked rain from her eyes. What? I'm heading north as well. We can travel together. There's safety in numbers. I don't know you. I just saved your life. That doesn't mean I trust you. She held his gaze, refusing to look away even though every nerve in her body was screaming at her to submit. In my experience, strange males don't help for free. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The rain was falling harder now, plastering her hair to her cheeks and soaking through her cloak until she was shivering. She was cold. She was tired. And something about the way he was looking at her made her feel like she was standing next to a fire, like she would never be cold again if she just moved a little closer. You're afraid, he said quietly, not accusatory, just observant. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video. It tells me you want more stories like this. I'm not afraid of anything. Mira held his gaze even as her wolf whined in her chest. But I learned a long time ago that accepting help from strange males comes with a price, and I'm not willing to pay it. Theron's eyes went dark, the gold bleeding into something more dangerous. Something shifted in his expression, a flash of fury that wasn't directed at her, but at something else. Someone else. I would never. He stopped, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully controlled, each word measured and precise. I understand your caution. It speaks well of you. But I give you my word, on my honor and my blood and everything I am. No harm will come to you while you're with me, from anyone, including myself. His word. Wolves took their words seriously. Oaths weren't given lightly, and blood oaths even less so. But Mira had heard promises before, had watched them shatter against reality like glass against stone. Her former alpha's son had promised her the world, promised her love and safety and a future, and then his promises had turned to threats when she refused to submit. She opened her mouth to refuse. Please, Theron said. The word broke something in her. Such a simple word, spoken quietly, without demand or expectation. Like he was asking her for a gift she could choose to give or withhold. Like her choice mattered. When was the last time someone had said please to her? Pauses. Fine. she heard herself say, the word slipping out before she could stop it. But only until the northern pass. Then we go our separate ways. His shoulders relaxed, just slightly. If she hadn't been watching so closely, cataloging his every micro-expression, she would have missed it. Agreed. They walked in silence through the rain, the storm settling into a steady drizzle that soaked through everything. Theron led, cutting a path through the underbrush with an ease that spoke of years in the wilderness, of knowing the land like his own body. Mira kept 3 paces behind him, her hand on her knife, her wolf still pacing restlessly inside her. There was something wrong with her wolf. It had never acted this way before, never pressed and whined and strained toward anyone. Every time Theron glanced back to check on her, his amber eyes catching hers through the gloom, her wolf surged forward, wanting to be closer, wanting to touch. It made no sense. She had been around countless males in her life, strong ones, weak ones, cruel ones, and kind. None of them had ever made her wolf react like this. Unless... no. She shut the thought down before it could fully form, slamming a mental door on the possibility. That was impossible. The mate bond was rare, almost mythical. Most wolves went their entire lives without finding their fated match. Her own mother had never found hers, had settled for a loveless political marriage and spent her life with shadows in her eyes. And even if such things were real, her mate wouldn't be some stranger she met in the woods. Life didn't work that way. Not her life, anyway. They made camp in a shallow cave as darkness fell, the rain still pattering against the rocks outside their shelter. Theron built a fire with efficient movements while Mira sat as far from him as the space allowed, her back against the cold stone wall. "You haven't eaten," he said, offering her dried meat from his own pack. "And your supplies are ruined. I have my own food. Yours got soaked in the rain. This is dry." She hesitated. He waited, patient and still, the firelight playing across the planes of his face. His eyes had deepened to amber in the warm light, almost hypnotic. Something about him looked familiar, like a face from a dream she couldn't quite remember. She took the food. "Thank you," she murmured, hating how small her voice sounded. He inclined his head and returned to tending the fire. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the crack of flames and the distant patter of rain beyond their shelter. It should have been uncomfortable. It wasn't. "Why are you going north?" Mira asked finally, unable to bear the quiet. Theron didn't look up from the fire. "Business." "What kind of business?" "The complicated kind." She snorted softly. "Helpful?" His lips curved into something that was almost a smile, and the sight of it made her heart stutter in her chest. "I could ask you the same thing. Why leave your pack? Why choose to be alone? It's not natural for wolves." The question hit closer than he could know. Mira looked into the fire, watching the flames dance, letting the heat warm her cold skin. "My pack wasn't a place where I could stay." "Because?" Long pause. "Because the alpha's son decided I would be his, whether I wanted to be or not." The words came out flat, rehearsed. She had told this story before. To the wolves who helped her escape. To herself in the dark nights when she wondered if she had made the right choice. "I was promised to him since I was 15. An arrangement between our families, meant to secure political alliances. But I never wanted him. I never felt..." She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "Felt what?" Mira met his eyes. In the firelight they were molten gold, burning with an intensity that made her breath catch. The bond, the pull, the recognition that's supposed to happen when you meet your mate. "I waited and waited for it to appear, but it never did. And when I told him I wouldn't marry without it, he said it didn't matter. That I was his, regardless of what the gods had to say about it." Theron's expression had gone very still, like a predator before the strike. His hands had stopped moving, clenched into fists at his sides. What happened? He tried to force the issue. Came to my room one night, told me that if I wouldn't accept him willingly, he would make sure I had no choice. She swallowed hard, pushing past the memory. So I ran. Simple words for the most terrifying night of her life. The scramble through the window, her nightgown tearing on the stones, the howls behind her getting closer. The days of hiding and starving in hollow trees and abandoned dens until she was far enough away that he stopped looking. Or maybe he hadn't stopped. Maybe he was still looking. I've been running ever since. Voice breaks. He sounds like he deserved to die, Theron said quietly, and the calm certainty in his voice made her shiver. There was something dangerous beneath those words, a promise of violence that should have frightened her. It didn't, maybe, but I just wanted to be free. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, making herself small. I'm saving myself for my mate. The real one. The one the gods chose for me, if he even exists. I know that probably sounds foolish to you. Why would it sound foolish? Because I'm waiting for something that might never come. Because I gave up everything, my pack, my family, my future, for a fairy tale that most wolves never experience. She laughed, but it came out hollow, brittle around the edges. But I'd rather be alone forever than bound to someone who doesn't feel like mine. Theron was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. The fire cracked between them. Her wolf was pressing against her ribs again, whining softly. It's not foolish, he said, his voice rough with something she couldn't name. It's the bravest thing I've ever heard. Their eyes met across the flames, and that pull in her chest drew so tight it was almost painful. Mira looked away first, her heart pounding. We should sleep, she said. Long day tomorrow. She lay down with her back to the fire, to him, and closed her eyes. Sleep was a long time coming. The next 2 days passed in a strange rhythm. They walked, they camped. Slowly, in pieces, they talked. Theron asked her about her childhood, her dreams, the things she loved. Small questions that somehow felt enormous. And despite herself, despite every instinct telling her to keep her walls up, Mira answered. She learned that he loved the smell of rain on pine needles, that it reminded him of his mother who had died when he was young, that he had been leading since he was 18, though he didn't say, leading what? That he had a sister he would die for, a warrior in her own right, who frightened grown males with a single glare. That he had lost his father too young and still carried the weight of that loss in the shadows beneath his eyes. On the second evening, they came across a small stream, and Theron caught fish for their dinner. Mira watched him work, efficient and sure, and found herself smiling without meaning to. What? He asked, catching her expression. Nothing. You're just not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone colder. Someone who wanted something from me. Someone who would demand payment for his help. His eyes met hers across the crackling fire. I do want something from you. Her breath caught, her heart pounding hard enough that surely he could hear it. What? Your trust. Pauses. Why does that matter to you? We're strangers. After tomorrow, we'll never see each other again. He was quiet for a long moment, so long that she thought he wouldn't answer. The firelight danced across his features, casting shadows that made him look both dangerous and impossibly beautiful. When he spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw with emotion. Because you matter to me, and I don't know how to explain that in a way that doesn't sound insane, so I'm not going to try. Not yet. But I need you to know that whatever happens, I will never hurt you. Never force you. Never ask for anything you're not ready to give. Mira's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her wolf was howling inside her chest, triumphant and desperate all at once, pressing against her skin like it wanted to merge with his. Theron, we should sleep, he said, echoing her words from the first night. His voice was strained, like he was holding himself back from something. Long day tomorrow. She didn't sleep at all. On the third day, they reached the edge of the northern pass. A small trading post sat at the base of the mountains, a handful of wooden buildings clustered together against the cold wind that swept down from the peaks. Mira recognized the banner flying above the largest building, snapping in the breeze. The royal crest of the Alpha King, a wolf's head crowned with stars. She stopped walking, ice sliding down her spine. "What is it?" Theron asked, concern flickering across his features. "Why is the royal banner here?" He followed her gaze to the crest. Something in his expression shifted, too quick for her to read. "The king has outposts throughout the territories. This must be one of them. We should go around. I don't want any trouble with—" But it was too late. The doors to the outpost were opening, and wolves were pouring out. 10, 15, 20 of them, all in the dark uniforms of the royal guard, silver embroidery glinting on their chests. And they were heading straight toward them. Mira's hand flew to her knife. Theron stepped in front of her, putting himself between her and the approaching wolves, his body a wall of protection. "Stand down," he said calmly. To Mira's shock, they obeyed. Every single one of them dropped to one knee, their heads bowed, their right fists pressed to their hearts in the formal salute. "Your Majesty," the leader said, his voice reverent. "We received word of your approach. The outpost is prepared for your arrival." The world tilted sideways. "Your Majesty." Mira stared at Theron's back, at the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, the authority that suddenly made terrible, perfect sense, the expensive clothes, the confidence, the way he had killed a rogue with his bare hands like it was nothing. "You're the Alpha King," she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Theron turned to face her. His expression was careful, guarded, but his eyes were pleading. "Mira, you're the Alpha King and you didn't tell me." The words came out sharp, edged with betrayal. "I was going to—" "When?" Her voice cracked despite her efforts to keep it steady. "When were you going to mention that you're the most powerful wolf in existence? When we got to the pass and you disappeared into your palace? When I fell for your lies like every other fool who—" She stopped. The word hung in the air between them like a held breath. "Fell." "I didn't lie," Theron said quietly. His voice was steady despite the chaos of the kneeling guards, the watching eyes. "Everything I told you was true. My name, my past, my word that I would never hurt you." He took a step closer, and this time she didn't step back. "I didn't tell you what I was because I wanted you to know who I am first. The man, not the title. I wanted you to choose me without the weight of a crown on the scale." "Choose you for what?" He held her gaze. Around them, the royal guards were still kneeling, still waiting. Snow had begun to fall from the gray sky, soft flakes catching in Theron's dark hair like scattered stars. "I felt you," he said, his voice dropping low, meant only for her. "The moment I entered that clearing, before I even saw you. My wolf knew. The bond pulled so hard I couldn't breathe." His hand reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. "I have waited my entire life for you, Mira. I have turned down every political match, every arranged marriage, because I knew you were out there somewhere. And when I finally found you, I didn't want to lose you before you could know me." Mira's chest was so tight she could barely breathe. Her wolf was singing, actually singing, filling her with a warmth that spread from her heart to the tips of her fingers. "The bond," she whispered. "You felt the bond?" "From the first moment. From the first breath." His fingers brushed her cheek, and the world exploded into golden light. Voice breaks. She gasped. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, nothing she had ever dreamed. Warmth flooding through her veins like sunlight, like fire, like coming home after years of wandering. A connection snapped into place so powerfully she could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own. Love and devotion and fierce protection, all pouring through the golden thread that now bound them together. Her mate, her fated mate, the one she had been saving herself for, waiting for, believing in against all evidence and all reason, and he was the Alpha King. Mira, Theron breathed. His forehead dropped to rest against hers, his eyes closing, his expression almost pained in its intensity. Tell me you feel it. Tell me I'm not dreaming. I feel it, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. I feel you. He kissed her. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the strength she knew they held. His lips were warm against hers, soft and demanding all at once. She melted into him, her fingers gripping the front of his coat, pulling him closer, kneading him closer. The bond between them hummed with joy, with rightness, with a connection that felt older than time itself. When they finally broke apart, Mira was trembling. I'm not queen material, she said shakily. I don't know how to rule. I don't know how to be what you need. I'm just a runaway wolf with nothing to offer. Theron smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise over the mountains. You're exactly what I need. You're brave and strong, and you didn't bow to me once even when I wanted you to. You challenged me, questioned me, kept me honest. He pressed another kiss to her forehead, lingering there like she was something sacred. I don't need a queen who knows how to rule. I need a partner who knows how to love. The rest we'll figure out together. Together, she repeated, testing the word. Always. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest. Safe, warm, home. Come back to the palace with me, not as a subject, as my mate, as my equal, as the woman I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve. Mira thought about the years of running, the loneliness that had been her constant companion, the quiet belief, held close in the darkest nights, that somewhere out there was someone meant for her. She thought about the way he had saved her life and asked nothing in return. The way he had given her his word and kept it. The way he looked at her like she was precious, like she mattered, like she was more than enough. Yes, she said. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. The palace was nothing like Mira had imagined, not cold and distant but warm with life and history. Theron gave her time to adjust, never pushing, always patient. He showed her the gardens where his mother had spent her mornings, the library where his father had taught him to read, the training grounds where he had become the warrior he was today. And every night, he held her like she was something precious, something worth protecting with every breath in his body. The mating ceremony took place beneath a full moon, surrounded by thousands of wolves who had traveled from across the kingdom to witness their king claim his mate. Mira had been terrified, certain she would stumble over the ancient words or embarrass herself in front of the entire realm. But when Theron took her hands in his, when his eyes met hers with such overwhelming love, everything else faded away. There was only him, only them, only the bond that pulsed between them like a second heartbeat. When he marked her, sinking his teeth into the curve of her neck, Mira felt the bond snap fully into place. It was like a door opening into his soul, letting her feel everything he felt. The depth of his love, the fierceness of his protection, the absolute certainty that she was his, and he was hers, for as long as they both lived. That night, wrapped in his arms, Mira finally allowed herself to believe that she had found her forever. 2 months later, Mira stood on the balcony of the palace, watching the sun set over the kingdom that was now her home. The sky was painted in shades of gold and rose, colors that reminded her of his eyes. Below, the city spread out like a tapestry, filled with wolves who had become her people. "You're thinking too loudly." Theron's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. He pressed a kiss to the curve of her neck, right over the mark he had given her during their mating ceremony. "I can feel it through the bond." "I'm thinking about how strange life is," she admitted, leaning back into his warmth. "2 months ago, I was alone in the woods, running from everything. Now I'm here. Queen of the realm, mated to the most powerful wolf in existence. Having regrets?" She turned in his arms to face him. Her husband, her mate, her alpha king, who still looked at her like she had hung the moon in the sky. Not even one. He smiled and kissed her, slow and sweet. Around them, the palace hummed with life. The council had accepted her more easily than she expected, won over by her directness and her refusal to be intimidated. Theron's sister Lyra had become her closest friend, teaching her to fight, to lead, to be the queen she never thought she could be. And the pack, once a concept she had fled from, now felt like something worth fighting for. "I have something for you," Theron murmured against her lips. "Another gift? You're spoiling me." "That's the plan." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside sat a delicate ring, a band of silver set with a stone that shimmered like captured moonlight, like the bond she felt humming between them. "It was my mother's," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "My father gave it to her on the night of their mating ceremony. She used to say it reminded her of the moment their bond snapped into place, that feeling of finally being complete." He took her hand, sliding the ring onto her finger. "I want you to have it." Mira stared at the ring, at the way it caught the fading light. Her throat was tight with emotion. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. Pauses. "You deserve everything." Theron lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You deserve a kingdom and a crown and a mate who worships the ground you walk on. And lucky for you, you have all three." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "So humble." "I'm the Alpha King. Humility isn't in the job description." "Good thing you have me to keep your ego in check then." "Good thing indeed." He pulled her close again, his forehead resting against hers. Through the bond, she felt his love like sunlight, warm and constant and overwhelming. "I love you, Mira, more than I have words for, more than I knew I was capable of." "I love you too," she said. The words still felt new on her tongue, still sent shivers down her spine every time she spoke them. "More than I ever thought possible. Impossible. Probable. Definitely. Absolutely." She grinned against his lips, echoing his favorite phrase. "Wanna argue about it? With you? Always." He kissed her as the sun finished setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Mira, who had spent so long running, finally let herself stand still. She had found her mate, her home, her forever. And she was never letting go. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.